真方便。南无大悲观世音，愿我速成般若船。南无大悲观世音，愿我早得越苦海。南无大悲观世音，愿我速得界定道。南无大悲观世音，愿我早登涅槃山。南无大悲观世音，愿我速会无为身。南无大悲观世音，愿我早同发心身。我若向道山，道山自摧折；我若向火塘，火塘自枯竭；我若向地狱，地狱自消灭；我若向恶鬼，恶鬼自饱满；我若向修罗，恶行自漂浮；我若向畜生，自得大智慧。
So this talk is on how to cultivate bodhicitta through Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Dharma method, especially from a Tantrayana perspective. So parts of the presentation are extracted from Bhikshuni Thupten Chodron's talk on the 1,000-armed Chenrezig, the deity sadhana with guided meditation. It starts with the visualization. So in the space in front of us, then we can imagine visualize the divine form of 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, who is an embodiment of all the infinite Buddha's compassionate wisdom. So he stands on a lotus and moon seat. His body is in the nature of white light, youthful and decorated with magnificent jeweled ornaments. He has 11 faces. Of the 3 on his shoulders, his center face is white, the right green, and the left red. Above these, his center face is green, the right red, and the left white. Above those, his center face is red, the right white, and the left green. Above those is a wrathful dark blue face with yellow hair standing erect. On top of that is the red head of Amitabha Buddha, peaceful and smiling. Avalokiteshvara's first 2 hands are at his heart, palms together, holding a wish-fulfilling gem. On his right, the second hand holds a crystal rosary, reminding me to recite the mantra. The third hand is in the gesture of giving realizations, and from it a rain of nectar falls, curing the hunger and thirst of the hungry ghosts. The fourth hand holds a Dharma wheel. On his left, the second hand holds a golden lotus, the purest of flowers, although it is born from the mud. The third hand holds a vase containing the nectar of his compassionate wisdom. The fourth holds a bow and arrow, symbolizing defeat of the 4 negative forces. The other 992 hands are in the gesture of giving the highest realizations. An antelope skin is draped over his left shoulder, symbolizing that hatred is overcome completely by peaceful, compassionate wisdom. So taking refuge in generating altruistic intention or bodhicitta. So I take refuge until I am awakened or until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. This is recited 3 times from the depths of our hearts. Okay. Then the 4 immeasurables, they can follow this pattern. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May they abide in this way. I shall cause them to abide in this way. Guru Avalokiteshvara, please inspire me to be able to do so. So equanimity comes first. It's a reflection of the 7-fold cause and effect precept to generate bodhicitta. in which equanimity is a preliminary practice. One follows the same model for immeasurable love. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. Compassion, may all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. And joy, may all sentient beings abide in lasting happiness, free from the causes of suffering. Then there's the seven-limb prayer. And this includes prostration, offering, confession, rejoicing, requesting to the teachers to have long lives, requesting them to turn the wheel of Dharma, and the dedication. Then we have a mandala offering. We may do a short offering followed by a special prayer. The objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. So here, I didn't read the actual short mandala. I just read the special prayer that comes afterwards. So you can get all the short mandala, you can get all this information from the actual sadhana itself. Then there's a requesting prayer. O Arya, compassionate eyed one, who is the treasure of compassion, I request you, please listen to me. Please guide myself, mothers, and fathers in all 6 realms to be freed quickly from the great ocean of samsara. I request the vast and profound, peerless awakening mind may grow with the tear of your great compassion. Please cleanse all karmas and delusions. Please lead with your hand of compassion me and migrators to fields of bliss. Please, Amitabha and Avalokiteshvara, in all my lives be virtuous friends. Show well the undeceptive, pure path and quickly place us in Buddha's state. Meditation, then what comes next is there's a meditation on the 8 verses of thought transformation or mind training. So I want to go, this is Geshe Langri Tangpa, I wanted to go into detail, give a detailed commentary about this. Very, very brief, but detailed, okay? So the first verse, with a determination to achieve the highest aim for the benefit of all sentient beings, which surpasses even the wish-fulfilling gem, may I hold them dear at all times. The following discussion that I'm going to give here was excerpted from teaching by the 14th Dalai Lama called Training the Mind, and it can be found on his website. So the Dalai Lama says the first 7 verses of the 8 verses for Training the Mind deal with the practices associated with cultivating the method aspect of the path, such as compassion, altruism, aspiration to attain Buddhahood, and so on. The 8th verse deals with the practices that are directed towards cultivating the wisdom aspect of the path. We call this ultimate bodhicitta. These 4 lines are about cultivating a sense of holding dear all other sentient beings. The main point this verse emphasizes is to develop an attitude that enables you to regard other sentient beings as precious, much in the manner of precious jewels. Okay? A precious jewel is like Aladdin's lamp, all right, what we think of in the West. You make a wish for material things and it comes true. The question could be raised, why do we need to cultivate the thought that other sentient beings are precious and valuable? In one sense, we can say that other sentient beings are really the principal source of all our experiences of joy, happiness, and prosperity, and not only in terms of our day-to-day dealings with people. We can see that all the desirable experiences that we cherish or aspire to attain are dependent upon cooperation and interaction with other sentient beings. It's an obvious fact, right? Similarly, from the point of view of a practitioner on the path, many of the high levels of realization that you gain and the progress you make, or that we make on our spiritual journey, are dependent upon cooperation and interaction with other sentient beings. Furthermore, at the result state of the Buddhahood, the truly compassionate activities of the Buddha can come about spontaneously, or rather, can come about spontaneously without any effort, only in relation to sentient beings, because they are the recipients and the beneficiaries of those enlightened activities. So one can see that other sentient beings are, in a sense, the true source of our joy, prosperity, and happiness. Basic joys and comforts of life, such as food, shelter, clothing, also companionship, are all dependent upon other sentient beings. as is fame and renown. Our feelings of comfort and sense of security are dependent upon other people's perceptions of us and their affection for us. It is almost as if human affection is the very basis of our existence. Our life cannot start without affection, and our sustenance, proper growth, and so on all depend on it. In order to achieve a calm mind, the more you have a sense of caring for others, the deeper your satisfaction will be. The Dalai Lama says that he thinks that the very moment we develop a sense of caring, others appear more positive. This is because of our own attitude. On the other hand, if we reject others, they will appear to us as in a negative way. Another thing that is quite clear is that the moment we think only of ourselves, the focus of our whole mind narrows. And because of this narrow focus, uncomfortable things can appear huge and bring us fear and discomfort and a sense of feeling overwhelmed by misery. The moment we think of others with a sense of caring, however, our mind widens. Within that wider angle, our own problems appear to be of no significance. And this makes a big difference. If we have a sense of caring for others, we will manifest a kind of inner strength in spite of our own difficult situations and problems. With this strength, our problems will seem less significant and bothersome. By going beyond our own problems and taking care of others, we gain inner strength, self-confidence, courage, and a greater sense of calm. This is a clear example of how one's way of thinking, right, can really make a difference. So, as we said earlier, we can develop an attitude of considering other sentient beings as precious in the recognition of the part of their kindness, as precious in the recognition of the fact, right, that the part of their kindness plays in our own experience of joy, happiness, and success. This is the first consideration. The second consideration is as follows. Through an analysis and contemplation, we will come to see that much of our misery, suffering, pain really result from self-centered attitude that cherishes one's own well-being at the expense of others. Whereas much of the joy, the happiness, the sense of security in our lives arise from thoughts and emotions that cherish the well-being of other sentient beings. Contrasting these two forms of thought and emotion convinces us of the need to regard others' well-being as precious. This is another fact concerning the cultivation of thoughts and emotions that cherish the well-being of others. One's own self-interest and the wishes are fulfilled as a byproduct of actually working for other sentient beings. As Jason Kappa points out in his great exposition of the path to enlightenment, Lamrim Chenmo, the more the practitioners engage in activities and thoughts that are focused and directed towards the fulfillment of others' well-being, the fulfillment or realization of his or her own aspiration will come as a byproduct without having to make separate effort. In some sense, the bodhisattvas, the compassionate practitioners of Buddhism, of the Buddhist path, are wisely selfish people, whereas people like ourselves, right, are foolishly selfish. We think of ourselves and disregard others, and the result is that we always remain unhappy and have a miserable time. The time has come to think more wisely, don't you think? All right. Now, the point is to try to develop the scope of one's empathy in such a way that it can extend to any form of life, right? To all forms of life, to any form of life that has the capacity to feel pain and experience happiness. It is a matter of defining a living organism as a sentient being. This kind of sentience or sentiment is sentience, right? Sentiment is very powerful, and there is no need to be able to identify in specific terms with every single living being in order for it to be effective. Take, for example, the universal nature of impermanence. When we cultivate the thought that things and events are impermanent, we do not need to consider every single thing that exists in the universe in order for us to be convinced of impermanence. So that's not how the mind works, right? So it is important to appreciate this point. Now, when we talk about the second verse, whenever I interact with someone, may I view myself as the lowest amongst all, and from the very depths of my heart respectfully hold others as superior. The first verse pointed to the need to cultivate the thought of regarding all of the other sentient beings as precious. In the second verse, the point being made here is that the recognition of the preciousness of other sentient beings and the sense of caring that you develop on that basis should not be grounded on a feeling of pity towards other sentient beings. That is, on the thought that they are inferior. Rather, what is being emphasized is a sense of caring for other sentient beings and a recognition of their preciousness based on reverence and respect as superior beings. I would like to emphasize here now how we should understand compassion in the Buddhist context. Generally speaking, in the Buddhist tradition, compassion and loving kindness are seen as two halves of the same side of a coin. Compassion is said to be empathetic, like the empathetic wish that aspires to see the object of compassion, the sentient being, free from suffering. Loving kindness is the aspiration that wishes happiness upon others. In this context, love and compassion should not be confused with love and compassion in the conventional sense. For example, we experience a sense of closeness toward people who are dear to us. We feel a sense of compassion and empathy for them. We also have strong love for these people. But often this love or compassion is grounded in self-referential considerations. So-and-so is my friend, my spouse, right, my child, and so on. So what happens with this kind of love or compassion, which may be strong, is that it is tinged with attachment because it involves self-referential considerations. So once there is attachment, there is also the potential for anger and hatred to arise. Attachment goes hand in hand with anger and hatred. For example, once compassion towards someone is tinged with attachment, if it is, right, it can easily turn into its emotional opposite, anger, due to the slightest incident. Then instead of wishing that person to be happy, we might wish that person to be miserable. So true compassion and love in the context of training the mind are based on the simple recognition that others, just like ourselves, naturally aspire to be happy and to overcome suffering, and that others, just like ourselves, have the natural right to fulfill that basic aspiration. The empathy we develop toward the person based on recognition of this basic fact is universal compassion. There is no element of prejudice, no element of discrimination. This compassion is able to be extended to all sentient beings so long as they are capable of experiencing pain and happiness. Thus, the essential feature of true compassion is that it is universal and not discriminatory. As such, training the mind in cultivating compassion in the Buddhist tradition first involves cultivating a thought of even-mindedness or equanimity toward all sentient beings. For example, we may reflect upon the fact that such and such a person may be our friend, our relative, and so forth in this life, but that this person may have been, from a Buddhist point of view, our worst enemy in a past life. Similarly, we apply the same sort of reasoning to someone we consider an enemy. Although this person may be negative towards us and is our enemy in this life, he or she could have been our best friend in the past life, or could have been related to us, and so on. By reflecting upon the fluctuating nature of one's relationships with others, and also on the potential that exists in all sentient beings to be friends and enemies, we develop this even-mindedness or equanimity. The practice of developing or cultivating equanimity involves a form of detachment, but it is important to understand what detachment means. Sometimes when people hear about the Buddhist practice of detachment, they think that Buddhism is advocating indifference towards all things, but this is not the case. First, cultivating detachment, one could say, takes the sting out of discriminatory emotions towards others that are based on considerations of distance or closeness. We lay the groundwork on which we can cultivate genuine compassion extending to all other sentient beings. The Buddhist teaching on detachment does not imply developing an attitude of disengagement from or indifference to the world or life. Moving on to another line of the verse, I think it's important to understand the expression, may I see myself lower than all others, in the right context. Certainly it is not saying that we should engage in thoughts that would lead to lower self-esteem, or that we should lose all sense of hope and feel dejected, thinking, I am the lowest of all, I have no capacity, I cannot do anything, and have no power. This is not the kind of consideration of lowness that is being referred to here. The regarding of oneself as lower than others really has to be understood in relative terms. Generally speaking, human beings are superior to animals. We are equipped with the ability to judge between right and wrong and to think in terms of the future and so on, right? So, however, one could also argue that in other respects, human beings are inferior to animals. For example, animals may not have the ability to judge between right and wrong in a moral sense, and they might not have the ability to see the long-term consequences of their actions. But within the animal realm, there is at least a certain sense of order. If you look at the African savanna, for example, predators prey on other animals only out of necessity when they are hungry. When they are not hungry, you can see them coexisting quite peacefully. But we human beings, despite our ability to judge between right and wrong, sometimes act out of pure greed. Sometimes we engage in actions purely out of indulgence. We kill out of the sense of sport, for example, when we go hunting or fishing. So in a sense, one could argue that human beings have proven to be inferior to animals. It is in such relativistic sense or terms that we can regard ourselves as lower than others. One of the reasons for using the word lower is to emphasize that normally when we give in to ordinary emotions of anger, hatred, strong attachment, and greed, we do so without any sense of restraint. Often we are totally oblivious to the impact our behavior has on other sentient beings. But by deliberately cultivating the thought of regarding others as superior and worthy of our reverence, we provide ourselves with a restraining factor. Then when emotions arise, they will not be so powerful as to cause us to disregard the impact of our actions upon other sentient beings. It is on these grounds that recognition of others as superior to ourselves is suggested. All right? So this is then verse 3. In all my deeds may I probe into my mind, and as soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront them and avert them. Now, this verse really gets to the heart of what could be called the essence of the practice of the Buddha Dharma. When we talk about Dharma in the context of Buddhist teachings, we are talking about nirvana, or freedom from suffering. Freedom from suffering, nirvana, or cessation, is the true Dharma. There are many levels of cessation. For example, restraint from killing or murder could be a form of Dharma. But this cannot be called Buddhist Dharma specifically, because restraint from killing is something even someone who is non-religious can adopt as a result of following the law. The essence of the Dharma in the Buddhist tradition is that state of freedom from suffering or defilement. And in Sanskrit, it's a klesha. Tibetan is nommong, that sort of lie at the root of suffering. This verse addresses how to combat these defilements or afflictive emotions and thoughts. One could say that for a Buddhist practitioner, the real enemy is this enemy within, these mental and emotional defilements. It is these emotional and mental afflictions that give rise to pain and suffering. The real task of a Buddha Dharma practitioner is to defeat this inner enemy. Since applying antidotes to these mental and emotional defilements lies at the heart of the Dharma practice and is in some sense its foundation, the third verse suggests that it is very important to cultivate mindfulness right from the beginning. Otherwise, if you let negative emotions and thoughts arise inside ourselves, if we do that, without any sense of restraint, without any mindfulness of their negativity, then in a sense, we are giving them free rein. They can then develop to the point where there is simply no way to counter them. However, if we develop mindfulness of their negativity, then when they occur, we will be able to stamp them out as soon as they occur, as they arise. We will not give them the opportunity or the space to develop into full-blown negative emotional thoughts. The way in which this third verse suggests we apply an antidote is, I think, at the level of the manifested and felt experience of emotion. Okay? So I think it's at that level. It's at the level of the manifest and felt experience of emotion. All right? Instead of getting at the root of emotion in general, what is being suggested is the application of antidotes that are appropriate to specific negative emotions and thoughts. For example, to counter anger, we should cultivate love and compassion. To counter strong attachment in an object, right, or to an object, we should cultivate thoughts about the impurity of that object, its undesirable nature, and so on. To counter one's arrogance or pride, we need to reflect upon shortcomings in ourselves, right, that can give rise to a sense of humility. For example, we can think about all the things in the world about which we are completely ignorant. So take, for example, if someone is a sign language interpreter. So I think that, we look at them at the time when they're giving this interpretation with these complex gestures, and they're in the midst of doing the translation, and we don't have a clue, right? If you don't know sign language, we don't have a clue as to what's going on, and we see this quite a humbling experience. And then the Dalai Lama mentions that from his own experience, that whenever he has a little tinge, tiny little bit of pride arising, then he thinks about computers and how computers function, and then this lowers his tinge of pride and calms him down. Now, in the fourth verse, let's see here. Okay, the fourth verse, when I see beings of unpleasant character, oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I have discovered a jewel treasure. This verse refers to the special case of relating to people who are socially marginalized, perhaps because of their behavior, their appearance, their destitution, or on account of some illness. So whoever practices bodhicitta must take a special care of these people, take special care, as if on meeting them, for example, on meeting them, we have found a real treasure, something very precious. Instead of feeling repulsed, right, a true practitioner of these altruistic principles should engage and should take on the challenge of relating. In fact, the way we interact with people of this kind could give a great impetus to our spiritual practice. In this context, so I'd like to point out the great example set by many Christian brothers and sisters who engage in the humanitarian and caring professions, especially directed to marginalized members of society. So we have the example in our time of the late Mother Teresa, who dedicated her life to caring for the destitute. So she exemplifies the ideal that is described in this verse. It is on account of this important point that when Dalai Lama says when he meets members of Buddhist centers in various parts of the world, he often points out to them that it is not sufficient for a Buddhist center simply to have programs of teaching or meditation. There are, of course, very impressive Buddhist centers and some retreat centers where Western monks have been trained. So some of them have been trained so well that they're able to play the clarinet in the traditional Tibetan way, right? But anyway, Dalai Lama says that he also emphasizes to them the need to bring the social and the caring dimension into their program of activities, so that the principles presented in the Buddhist teachings can make a contribution to society. Now, Dalai Lama says that he's glad to say that He's heard that some Buddhist centers are beginning to apply Buddhist principles socially. For example, in Australia, there are Buddhist centers which are establishing hospices and helping dying people and caring for patients with AIDS. And then also it's heard that the Buddhist centers involved in some form of spiritual education in prisons where they give talks and offer counseling. So Dalai Lama says that he thinks that these are great examples. It is, of course, deeply unfortunate when such people, particularly prisoners, feel rejected by society. So not only is it deeply painful for them, but also from a broader point of view, it is loss for society. We are not providing the opportunity for these people to make a constructive social contribution when they actually have the potential to do so. So therefore, Dalai Lama thinks that it is important for society as a whole not to reject such individuals, but to embrace them and acknowledge the potential contribution they can make. In this way, they will feel they have a place in society and will begin to think that they might perhaps have something to offer. Now the fifth verse, when others out of jealousy treat me wrongly with abuse, slander, and scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. The point that is made here is that when others provoke you, provoke us, perhaps for no reason or unjustly, instead of reacting in a negative way, as a true practitioner of altruism, we should be able to be tolerant towards them. We should remain unperturbed by such treatment. In the next verse, we learn that not only should we be tolerant of such people, but in fact we should view them as our spiritual teachers. So it reads, the sixth verse, when someone whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hopes mistreats me in extremely hurtful ways, may I regard him still as my precious teacher. So in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, there is an extensive discussion of how we can develop this kind of attitude and how we can actually learn to see those who perpetuate harm, right, on us as objects of spiritual learning. And also in the third chapter of Chanchakirti's Entry to the Middle Way, there are profoundly inspiring and effective teachings on the cultivation of patience and tolerance. The seventh verse summarizes all the practices that we have been discussing. It reads, in brief, may I offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly. May I quietly take upon myself all hurts and pains of my mothers. This verse presents a specific Buddhist practice known as the practice of giving and taking, or Tonglen. And it is by means of the visualization of giving and taking that we practice equalizing and exchanging ourselves with others. Exchanging ourselves with others should not be taken in the literal sense of turning oneself into the other, right? Or the other into oneself. This is impossible anyway. What is meant here is a reversal of the attitudes one normally has towards oneself and others. We tend to relate to this so-called self as a precious core at the center of our being, something that is really worth taking care of, to the extent that we are willing to overlook the well-being of others. In contrast, our attitude towards others often resembles indifference. At best, we may have some concern for them, but even this may simply remain at the level of a feeling or an emotion. On the whole, we are indifferent towards others' well-being, right? Towards others' well-being, and do not take it seriously. So the point of this particular practice is to reverse this attitude so that we reduce the intensity of our grasping and the attachment we have to ourselves, and endeavor to consider the well-being of others as significant and important. Then we have verse 8, the final verse. May all this remain undefiled by the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, and may I, recognizing all things as illusion, devoid of clinging, be released from bondage. So this final verse discusses ultimate bodhicitta, while the first 7 verses discuss conventional bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta is the wisdom directly realizing the nature of reality, emptiness of inherent existence. This was presented in more detail in the class I gave on this Vajra Chejika Prajna Paramita Sutra, which is also known as the Diamond Sutra for Vesak, and that was earlier this year. Now to conclude the Avalokiteshvara practice, so purification and receiving inspiration. Avalokiteshvara, now go back to the visualization, right? Avalokiteshvara was in front of us. So then Avalokiteshvara now comes to the top of your head, to the top of our head, facing the same direction as ourself. Avalokiteshvara also appears on the heads of all sentient beings who are seated around us. At the heart of each Avalokiteshvara are a lotus and a flat moon disk. Standing at the center of the moon is the seed syllable Hri, the essence of Avalokiteshvara's omniscient mind, of wisdom and compassion. This is surrounded by the letter of the long mantra, and inside this stand the letters of the 6th syllable mantra. All is made of radiant light. From the mantra and the mantras in the Hri, much light, white light and nectar, the nature of Avalokiteshvara's blissful omniscient mind, flow into us, permeating our entire nervous system. They totally purify all afflictions, imprints of negative karma, diseases, and obscurations. Feel completely pure and blissful. The light and nectar also fill us with all the realizations of the stages of the path to awakening or enlightenment, especially Avalokiteshvara's love, compassion, and wisdom. Similarly, light and nectar from the Avalokiteshvaras on the crowns of all sentient beings flow into them, purifying all negativities and obscurations, and inspiring them with all the realizations of the path to enlightenment. So we do this visualization while reciting the long mantra and then the 6th syllable mantra. So here you can recite the long mantra, and then the 6th syllable mantra you can recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Then we do the absorption. Think, I will live my life in a meaningful way and do all actions with the motivation to attain awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Because we have such a noble intention, Avalokiteshvara is extremely pleased. He melts into white light and absorbs into our heart. By Avalokiteshvara absorbing into us, our mind becomes the nature of great compassion, loving kindness, and bodhicitta. Our body is filled with light and becomes very pure and clear, like crystal. Concentrate on this for a while. Avalokiteshvaras on the heads of all sentient beings melt into light, absorb into them, and bless them so that they may progress along the gradual path to awakening. Then we do a dedication. So I have a very brief dedication here. You can do a more extensive one as you'd like. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Avalokiteshvara, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So thank you.
方便。南无大悲观世音，愿我速成般若船。南无大悲观世音，愿我早得越苦海。南无大悲观世音，愿我速得界定道。南无大悲观世音，愿我早登涅槃山。南无大悲观世音，愿我速会无为舍。南无大悲观世音，愿我早同发心身。我若向道山，道山自摧折；我若向火塘，火塘自枯竭；我若向地狱，地狱自消灭；我若向恶鬼，恶鬼自饱满；我若向修罗，恶行自漂浮；我若向畜生，自得大智慧。
halaman 开75页 halaman 75. 空了无神真佛。 舍舍迦牟尼世尊。一心西方极乐世界阿弥陀世尊。一心过去无量一切见观望尽诸世尊。一心过去九色九因可迦萨诸佛世尊。一心过去无量劫真法明日尊。一心十方一切诸佛世尊。一心现界前佛三世一切诸佛世尊。一心广大圆满无碍大悲心大陀罗尼僧妙常寂。一心广大圆满无碍大悲心大陀罗尼僧妙常寂。一心广大圆满无碍大悲心大陀罗尼僧妙常寂。一心观音所说诸陀罗尼及十方三世一切诸法。一心千手千眼大慈大悲观世音自在菩 心千手千眼大慈大悲观世音自在菩萨摩萨。一心千手千眼大慈大悲观世音自在菩萨摩萨。一心大势至菩萨摩萨。一心众智王菩萨摩萨。一心热光菩萨夜光菩萨摩萨。一心宝王菩萨药王菩萨药上菩萨摩萨。一心华严菩萨大庄严菩萨宝藏菩萨摩萨。一心德藏菩萨金刚藏菩萨虚空藏菩萨摩萨。一心弥勒菩萨普贤菩萨文殊师利菩萨摩萨。一心十方三世一切菩萨摩萨。一心 心参天台教观世明尊者法子大师。一心大为三藏佛摩诃婆伽天子护世十王天龙八部龙母天女虚空神将二神天眼神和尚神药草树林神自在神水神佛神福神度神禅神地神宫殿神等级守护持一切天龙鬼神各齐全作顶礼三宝。经言若有比丘尼有婆舍有婆夷童男童女一双持者一诸众生其慈悲心现当从我法罗舍耶。南无大悲观世音我所知一切法。南无大悲观世音愿我早得智慧也。南无大悲观世音愿我速度一切众。南无大悲观世音愿我早得三方便。南无大悲观世音愿我速证般若庄。南无大悲观世音愿我早得业不害。南无大悲观世音愿我速得戒定道。南无大悲观世音愿我早得涅槃山。南无大悲观世音愿我速会无为师。南无大悲观世音愿我道东发心生。我若向道山道相知 想修罗，恶行者了佛。我若想助生，自得大智慧。南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无观世音菩萨，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，南无阿弥陀佛，从此大悲深恩重，都善恶道成，我是报成真人间，从此大悲深恩重，若不生诸佛果子，我是报成真人间，从此大悲深重，若不得无量三昧辩才真，我是报成真人间，从此大悲深恩重。以现在深恩重，一切所求若不过随业者，报得伟大悲心。 乃至说是以众会前合掌真恩主，以诸众生其大悲心，开颜含难笑，接受如是广大圆满无碍大悲心，大头老深妙常解陀罗尼耶那摩拉达那多拉耶耶那摩利耶摩罗揭谛斯摩拉耶菩提萨埵摩耶摩诃萨埵婆耶摩诃迦卢尼迦耶安萨摩拉瓦耶苏达那达谢南无世界利多伊蒙诃利耶波罗揭谛斯佛拉莲陀婆南无那拉金遮悉利摩诃不多萨弥萨婆大头苏婆阿斯因萨婆萨多南无婆萨南无婆伽摩法得多难自他南无卢悉卢迦帝迦罗帝耶悉利摩诃菩提萨埵萨婆萨婆摩来摩来摩悉摩悉利大愿揭罗揭罗揭摩不要收经书，不收经书。耶帝摩诃法舍耶悉多来多来利利利经书不要收，给他们念。真来摩摩法摩来摩地利耶舍耶舍舍那舍那欧来舍佛来舍利法僧法僧无来舍耶无噜噜摩来吼噜吼噜悉利娑拉娑拉悉利悉利娑罗娑罗菩提耶菩提耶菩提耶菩提耶弥地利耶那来先舍地利萨尼那婆耶摩那萨婆悉多耶萨婆摩悉多耶萨婆悉多哟耶斯波拉耶萨婆那来先舍萨婆摩拉那来萨婆悉来僧阿摩揭耶萨婆萨婆摩悉多耶萨婆遮揭拉悉多耶萨婆布达摩揭悉多耶萨婆那来信则波揭拉耶萨婆摩婆利僧揭拉耶萨婆南无来达那多拉耶耶南无利耶波罗揭谛斯波拉耶萨婆安悉殿都曼多拉巴多耶萨婆南无来达那多拉耶耶南无利耶波罗揭谛斯波拉耶菩提萨埵婆耶摩诃萨埵婆耶摩诃迦卢尼迦耶安萨婆拉法耶苏达那达谢南无世界利多伊蒙诃利耶波罗揭谛斯佛拉莲陀婆南无那来金遮悉利摩诃不多萨弥 萨婆达多苏婆摩斯萨婆萨多南无婆萨多南无婆伽摩法特多丹次达安那波罗西卢迦提迦罗提西里摩菩提萨多萨婆萨婆摩拉摩拉摩西摩西里多因切罗切罗切蒙多罗多罗瓦斯耶帝摩法斯耶帝多拉帝利尼舍佛来耶则来摩摩法摩来摩帝利一西神来欧来舍佛来舍利法僧佛来舍耶呼噜摩拉呼噜西里萨拉西里苏罗菩提耶菩达耶尼提利耶罗来金色地利舍尼那婆耶摩那萨婆悉多耶萨婆摩悉多耶萨婆悉多有耶舍佛来耶萨婆罗来金色萨婆摩来那来萨婆悉拉僧阿摩切耶萨婆摩悉多耶萨婆遮起来哦悉多耶萨婆波多摩切悉多耶萨婆那来僧尊梵切来耶萨婆摩婆利僧切来耶萨婆南无来丹那多来耶南无利耶波罗揭谛舍佛来耶萨婆安悉殿多曼多拉巴多耶萨婆南无来丹那多来耶南无利耶波罗揭谛舍佛来耶菩提萨埵婆耶摩诃萨埵婆耶摩诃迦罗尼迦耶安乐波拉萨耶苏檀那檀谢南无世切利多伊蒙摩利耶波罗揭谛舍佛来莲陀婆南无那来金色悉利摩诃波多萨弥萨婆达多苏婆阿舍因萨婆萨多南无婆萨多南无婆伽摩法斯多丹次塔阿那波罗西罗迦提迦罗提耶悉利摩菩提萨埵萨婆摩来摩西利多因吉罗多罗法舍耶帝摩诃法舍耶帝多来帝利尼舍佛来耶则来摩法摩来摩帝利耶舍那欧拉僧佛来舍利花僧佛来舍耶呼噜摩来呼噜悉利萨拉悉利苏噜菩提耶菩陀耶弥提利耶那来金遮地利舍尼那婆耶摩那萨婆悉多耶萨婆摩悉多耶萨婆悉多有耶舍佛来耶萨婆那来金遮萨婆摩来那来萨婆悉来僧阿摩切耶萨婆摩悉多耶萨婆遮起来哦悉多耶萨婆波多摩切悉多耶萨婆那来金遮摩切来耶萨婆摩婆利僧切来耶萨婆南无来丹那多来耶南无利耶波罗揭谛舍佛来耶萨婆安悉殿多曼多拉法多耶萨婆。 一流变正通，天意宝华缤纷而下，十方诸佛悉皆欢喜，天魔外道，恐怖冒数，一切众会皆复国尊获得四头还空，获得四头还国，获得阿那含果，获得阿罗汉果，获得一地、二地、三世、五地，乃至舍地者，量众生发菩提心，我及众生。为愿家佛灵长笑面，何为世恩善友，法界众生心愿断诸三障。随喜凡身一毫子，三愿舍凡风有大富慧能救把我记住众生，从二十海这三得岸，从无始来不知诸法，本性空寂广照众恶，今知空寂为求菩提，众生广修众佛偏断众恶，唯愿观音慈悲。先忏悔，弟子中等，依法见一切众生，先见一切本具见法，见 相，爱见为本，身口为言，力作有终，无罪不造，十恶无逆，帮法帮人，破觉破灾，回答坏事，都生于我，无尽反省，亲顺长住，吝啬财物，见佛主持，不动忏悔，如是等罪，无量无边，智者尽灭，阿多善透，悲因顽固，佛业见色，中道矫健，恶气隐藏，他言必破，仗义道法，不得熏修，其余大悲圆满神咒，殊能灭众，如是罪障，故业尽了，自信颂者，回向观世音菩萨及十方大士，发菩提心，修正言行，一助众生，发露重罪，求其忏悔，毕竟小处，唯愿大悲观世音菩萨摩诃萨，坚守护持，千言照见，令我对内外障眼睛面持他心眼眼神，开本见智，处处谋外，三业清净，修净如因，这是此生，更无他具，决定得生。阿弥陀佛，极乐世界，清晨供养，大悲观音，具足众生，广度尽品，皆诸无论，同道日尽。忏悔发愿力，归命令三宝。 阿弥 世一切诸佛。南无大智文殊师利菩萨，南无大恩普贤菩萨，南无大悲观世音菩萨，南无大愿地藏王菩萨，南无护法诸天菩萨，南无伽蓝身众菩萨，南无历代诸师菩萨，南无大圣经那罗王菩萨，南无上界圣贤菩萨，南无藏诸十方佛，南无藏诸十方法，南无常住十方神，南无本师释迦牟尼佛，南无消灾延寿药师佛，南无极乐世界阿弥陀佛，南无当来下生弥勒尊佛，南无十方三世一切诸佛，南无大智文殊师利菩萨，南无大恩普贤菩萨，南无大悲观世音菩萨，南无大愿地藏王菩萨，南无护法诸天菩萨，南无伽蓝身众菩萨，南无历代诸师菩萨，南无大圣经那罗王菩萨，南无三界圣贤菩萨，南无常住十方佛，南无常住十方法，南无常住十方神，南无本师释迦牟尼佛，南无消灾延寿药师佛，南无极乐世界阿弥陀佛，南无当来下生弥勒尊佛，南无十方三世一切诸佛，南无大智文殊师利菩萨，南无大恩普贤菩萨，南无大悲观世音菩萨，南无大愿地藏王菩萨，南无护法诸天菩萨，南无伽蓝身众菩萨，南无历代诸师菩萨，南无大圣经那罗王菩萨，南无三界圣贤菩萨，南无萨瓦当他耶罗波罗揭谛安萨婆来萨婆来哦，南无萨瓦当他耶罗波罗揭谛安萨婆来萨婆来哦，南无萨瓦当他耶罗波罗揭谛安萨婆来萨婆来哦，南无梭罗波耶当他耶罗耶端智大安梭罗梭罗波来梭罗波来梭罗萨婆，南无梭罗波耶当他耶罗耶端智大安梭罗梭罗波来梭罗波来梭罗萨婆，南无梭罗波耶当他耶罗耶端智大安梭罗梭罗波来梭罗波来梭罗萨婆，这是释迦为上供十方佛，种种诸圣贤下界六道边，人生无差别，随业却饱满，聆听是这道无量 三德六位，供佛及圣人，法界有情，跑动公羊上来修见，常年每夜期间，消灾大悲平安道场。发挥恭请沙门僧伽带领奉诵顶礼报忏难，日无限风上风在诸世中，供佛实在所有吉祥疑问对佛批判，大眼睛中后垂龙。大悲会上诸佛菩萨，护法龙天鸟刹大江海会迎来际，千手千年升观自在12大眼赞，人数给人间之福慧，所有之今之意是天下难占不走，在诸三星记住印度尼西亚各省各市，首都雅加达，中加瓦三宝龙，东加瓦泗水巴厘岛，以及苏北缅兰、坤甸、本地亚纳西加里曼丹，美国洛杉矶、罗斯维加，以及邻国人等发挥共就雅加达大叢山西襌寺，皆然记住红枫。始终在诸位祈求消灾增福慧，广结善缘扶持道场，设在宫中，今有掌心化成一株合家，今生福持大在一堂宫中，又有在诸陈丽娜、陈妍妍，今生如意大在一堂宫中，又有在诸观有金小宝一合家，50中林佩金合家，又有林延龙周修行合家，又有何书中陈桂燕合家，又有佘自强黄山龙合家，又有刘正义黄立斌合家，又有刘柱东、刘柱亮一同，有蔡金忠、黄金梅合家，有陈林如意。陈景同合家，有传书合家，法界法器法喜一同，有张令金州张明明合家，又有小明宝张新兰合家，又有狮子堂林美玲合家，也有苏黄一叶苏立祥苏嘉欣合家，有张良春一连真合家，有林立明邱培芬合家，又有邱成康陈丽娟合家，又有陈永新吴美群合家，又有PT Holy Maju Group 报号，又有 PT Sejahtera Abadi Sejati 报号，才来成王一枚合家。以上在诸个金色吉祥大在各一堂宫中，又有在诸PT Sinar Surya Sentosa Sejahtera 报号，黄红清合家，又有翁张美兰翁世一合家，又有张兆二林不生合家，又有一则兆真陈仲二合家，又有吴一霞黄维平王维生合家，又 夜饮两盘梨花合家有林家春，陈满林合家有刘义林，陈爱玲合家有关家大，刘新辉合家有黄水龙是美丽合家，罗西大洋嘎萨布达。Mahavira Publikasi有郭碧叶合家有美丽外。Irin Chandra Haja Yoyo PT Putra Cipta Yaya Sentosa PT Putra Bangun Rubber Indonesia PT LKJ Yoyo Mariana Roni Fendi Haja Yoyo回向已故阿里赞拉造了离苦的超生弥陀经中有真光法灵业因合家又有刘坤祥刘坤良合家以上在座三星各精神吉祥大在各一堂宫中又有在座时辰回波美珠合家又有UNICEF 的教练那位以上在座各精神吉祥大在各一堂宫中又有在座经由缅南佛教圣称大冲山禅师主修沙门本山主持率黄喜避风黄子松李平一合家金色福德大在一堂宫中又有陈准良黄立方合家金色福德大在一堂宫中又有黄立福高秀英合家金色福德大在一堂宫中又有在主黄喜避风合家金色如意大在一堂宫中有黄金叶吴秀一合家金色如意大在一堂宫中有黄子谦刘明乱合家金色如意大在一堂宫中有黄子燕林树亭金色如意大在一堂宫中又有黄子才李国兰金色如意大在一堂宫中又有在主仅有林文辉林丽金合家又有以为用陈贵业合家又有陈耀明和李龙陈雄波合家又有杨明强陈贵美合家又有曾志荣黄山里合家又有陈兆文李秀华合家以上在座各精神吉祥大在各一堂宫中又有钟家洼山宝龙南山禅师主修沙门本山主持率领在座黄喜避风黄子松李平一合家金色万延大在各一堂万延大在一堂宫中又有多个马斯马里宝号蔡丽丽陈友爱合家金色福寿大在一堂宫中又有在座PT berkat mandiri Adi Jasa Jaya 陈鸿生 Tony 合家又有关秀美安瑞安妮乌兰萨尼布尔合家又有伊林黄春兰合家又有董明东杨静婷合家又有金福堂梁光生文成碧合家以上在座各精神吉祥如意大在一堂宫中又有三宝龙在座黄一言陈淑金黄山泉合家有福德宫我光平和山又有北德印德鲁沙佛林金珠哈林苏山多合家北德murti prima佛北德苏迪曼比苏塞林米蒂合家又有雷尼纳夏安德鲁纳达利合家有哈山 Effendi Irin Effendi 合家有 Henry 苏山多无力清合家有阿里苏山多不会因合家又有林景是林景王合家又有黄树下佛尼索菲安合家又有林景兴林业二合家有回向一故为利苏西罗大妈早日离苦得了超生弥陀净土各精神地想大在各一堂宫中又有大冲西迦利曼丹坤殿大冲山东佛禅师主修沙门本山主持率在主仅有回向一故阿弥陀心哈心不完早日离苦得了超生弥陀净土金色 福慧大在一堂宫中又有在主潘伟良两爱林和家精神如意大在一堂宫中又有在主李彦东蔡美和家。以上在诸个景色吉祥大在各一堂宫中，又有巴黎到大众三界广禅寺，今有陈汉明张凤兰和家，又有蔡继义黄丽娟和家。以上在诸个景色吉祥大在各一堂宫中，本是所有参加大悲忏法会所有人等燃点常言长生如意人等四众弟子虔诚红香口南无萨婆教主本师释迦牟尼问佛，南无消灾延寿药师琉璃光佛，南无西方极乐世界无量寿佛，南无大慈大悲观世音菩萨，南无救苦救难大愿地藏王菩萨，南无大悲会上诸佛菩萨，参摩海会护法龙天要察大将，各报今年坐下，恭请一家，延年在主，短信香花，参每月农历，恭请沙门期间大悲消灾平安法会，法会恭请沙门带领奉送慈悲报忏。日无限供上奉，在诸善心供佛实在，法会回向菩提，消灾延寿，吉祥神咒，根器家门长生，人口平安，身财有道，生意兴隆，所求所愿，若一柔心放在虚业之中，千丈诸佛菩萨护法龙天加持。社会安定，民主和谐，灾障消除。政府首长真空慷慨，文武百官富国有民，在诸事中消灾延寿，法体安康，家庭和乐，事业顺利，福慧增长，菩提精进，庄严功德得大家。清净海中安和分的生会法轮常转，说经上文太岁龙历壬寅复历2566年8月16日，主修沙门本山主持率所有供佛实在人等参加大悲忏法会，三星中等虔诚红香。
宝忏消灾吉祥盛会，礼忏功德回向法界，新冠疫情早日受控，四众斋主消灾延寿，福慧增长，得大欢喜。阿弥陀佛。Bagi yang mau berdana paramita, minta suhu-suhu naik ke atas memimpin, membaca pukul itu bohi ya, melafal nama Buddha. Hai tiền lại su tu sang lại suhu-suhu bantuin. Baca ya.
大悲观世音。